There are some mistakes a person can bury for years, and then there are some mistakes that time itself refuses to forgive. In Africa, there is a saying, the child you throw away today may be the one standing at your gate tomorrow. But what happens when that child returns? Not as the broken boy you abandoned, but as the man who could destroy the life you built without him. This is the story of a woman who traded her own son for a life of luxury. Her name was Halima. Halima was young, beautiful, and dangerously ambitious. She dreamed of expensive perfumes, designer clothes, and a life far away from the dusty streets of the small town where she lived. But there was one problem standing in the way of that dream: a 10-year-old boy. His name was Sadik. To the world, he was just a skinny boy with curious eyes and dusty sandals. But to Halima, he had become something else entirely, a reminder of the life she wanted to erase. You see, Halima had just met Chief Tunde Balogun, a powerful Lagos businessman whose wealth could change anyone's life overnight. He owned houses across Nigeria, drove cars people stopped to stare at, and lived in a mansion where even the gates looked more expensive than most people's homes. But there was one thing Chief Tunde believed about Halima. He believed she was a free one, a beautiful single lady with no baggage, no past, no child. And Halima was determined to keep it that way. So one evening, under the fading orange sky, she took Sadik by the hand and led him to a crowded motor park. The boy thought they were traveling. He didn't know he was being abandoned. She gave him a small nylon bag with just 2 shirts inside. Then she bent down, touched his face, and said the words that would haunt both of them for the rest of their lives. "Stay here, I'll come back." Sadik waited. He waited as buses came and went. He waited as the sun disappeared. He waited as the park slowly became quiet. Night fell. People left. The lights dimmed. But his mother never came back. That night, a 10-year-old boy learned a painful truth many children never have to face. Sometimes, the people who should love you the most are the same ones who walk away. Halima, on the other hand, got exactly the life she wanted. Within a few years, she was living in one of the most expensive estates in Lagos. Designer clothes, luxury boutiques, a beauty salon business in Abuja, 4 expensive cars parked in front of her mansion in Lekki. To the world, Halima had become the definition of success. But hidden beneath all that wealth was a secret she prayed would never return. Because somewhere in the chaos of Lagos, the boy she abandoned was fighting to survive. At 12, Sadik ran through traffic selling bottled water. At 16, he pushed wheelbarrows in crowded markets just to eat. At 18, he buried the only woman who had ever shown him kindness. And on the night she died, standing beside her grave, he made a promise to himself. He would never beg life for mercy again. Years later, fate would lead him to the gates of the very mansion his mother lived in, not as her son, but as a mechanic. This is the story of the son she threw away.
Welcome to Folktales by Oma, where African stories come alive and every tale teaches the heart. Before we begin, join the family. Tap subscribe.
In a small town not far from Lagos, tucked behind dusty roads and unfinished buildings, lived a woman named Halima. She was beautiful, disturbingly so. The kind of beauty that made market women pause mid-sentence and men forget what they were about to say. Her skin was smooth and dark like polished mahogany. Her eyes carried a quiet intensity, the kind that promised something and never fully delivered. When she walked past, the whole street shifted. But Halima had long stopped seeing beauty as a gift. To her, it was a tool. She had grown up poor. Not the humble, dignified kind of poor that people romanticize in stories. No, the kind of paw that leaves permanent bruises, the kind where you eat once a day and call it enough, the kind where your school uniform is washed every night because you only have one, the kind where you watch richer girls from your window and feel something burning inside you that never quite goes away. So, when she became a woman, Halima made a decision deep in her bones. She would never be poor again. Not for love, not for loyalty, not for anything. She married young, a quiet, decent man who didn't have much but gave everything he had. They had a son together, a bright-eyed boy with his father's gentle forehead and Halima's sharp gaze. They named him Sadik. The name meant truthful in Arabic. It suited him perfectly because from the moment he could speak, Sadik never lied, not about anything. But Halima's first marriage did not survive her ambition. She left quietly, citing incompatibility. What she didn't say was that she had already set her eyes on a bigger horizon. Then she met Chief Tunde Bologo. He was everything her first husband was not: loud, powerful, and rich in the way that silences rooms. He owned properties across Lagos and Abuja. His name appeared in the kind of newspaper columns that ordinary people read and sighed over. His convoy always had at least 3 cars. He wore agbada that cost more than some families earned in a year. Chief Tunde was also a man with very particular expectations. He wanted a woman who was presentable, quiet when necessary, and completely uncomplicated. Halima understood this language well. She had been fluent in it all her life. There was only one problem: Sadik, her 10-year-old son. The boy worshipped her. He didn't understand money or power or ambition. He only understood that when he had a nightmare, she was the one who held him. When he scraped his knee, she was the one who blew on it. He followed her around the house like a small devoted shadow, proud in the way only children of beautiful mothers are proud. He had no idea that in the new chapter she was writing for herself, there was no role for him. Chief Tunde had made it known through careful words and deliberate silences. A ready-made child from another man was not part of the picture. He had daughters from a previous relationship. What he wanted was a clean slate and eventually a male heir of his own blood. Halima told herself she had no choice. She told herself she would send for Sadik later, when things settled, when Chief Tunde softened, when the timing was right. She told herself many things that she knew were not true. One humid evening in November, she dressed Sadik in his cleanest shirt and packed a small bag for him. 2 shirts, a small wrapper, a packet of crackers. She told him they were going somewhere. He was happy. He held her hand the whole ride. She took him to a busy motor park on the outskirts of Lagos, the kind of place that roars with life, conductors shouting, buses hissing, food sellers balancing trays on their heads, the kind of place where one small boy could disappear without anyone noticing. She bought him a bottle of Fanta. She sat with him on a low concrete ledge. Then she stood up. "Stay here," she told him softly. "I'll be back. I'm just going to speak with someone." Sadik nodded and sipped his Fanta. He waited. The sun moved across the sky and began to sink. Buses filled and left. Traders packed their goods. The crowd thinned. The roaring of the motor park became a low hum, then a murmur, then almost nothing. His Fanta bottle was empty. She did not come back. That night, a 10-year-old boy sat alone in the dark with a small bag of 2 shirts and a hat that was slowly learning the cruelest lesson childhood can teach. His mother had chosen her life, and he was not in it. 2 days passed. Sadik did not move far from where she had left him. Something in him refused to accept it. That stubborn, irrational faith that children carry. She said she would come back. She will come back. He begged the food seller for 2 pieces of bread. He slept behind the kiosk with cardboard under him. He watched every woman who walked past, heart lurching each time someone wore her color or walked her walk. On the 3rd morning, an old woman named Mama Bose found him. She had come to the motor park to buy palm oil from a distant supplier. She saw the boy sitting with his back against a peeling wall, knees to his chest, eyes staring at nothing. Mama Bose had learned to read pain. Life had been her teacher. She had once had a son, her only child, the axis of her whole world. A lorry had taken him on a rainy night many years ago on a road that had no business being that slippery. She had never fully recovered. She had only learned to carry the grief differently. When she looked at Sadik, she did not just see a lost child. She saw a child who had been put down. There is a difference between lost and abandoned, and Mama Bose had lived long enough to know it. She sat beside him. She didn't ask too many questions. She bought him a hot meal from a nearby bukateria, rice, stew, and a piece of fried fish, and watched him eat with the urgent focus of someone who had not been properly fed in days. Then she said simply, "Come, let's go home." Her house was a modest 2-room structure in a low-income part of town. The roof leaked when it rained heavily. The neighbors were loud. The street flooded in July. But inside those walls, she created something that Sadik had almost forgotten existed. Warmth, routine, the smell of soup on a fire, someone asking where you were when you stayed out too long. He called her Mama Bose within the first week. It felt natural. It felt necessary. Life was still hard, she was clear about that. She took in sewing work and sold small provisions. There was never excess, but she made sure he stayed in school, even when it cost her. She patched his uniform when it tore. She sat with him at night and listened when he talked and said nothing when he went quiet. At 12, Sadik began hawking cold bottled water in traffic. He did it every day after school and on weekends. He learned to run between moving cars without flinching, balancing his cooler, reading faces to know which driver might buy and which would wave him away. He got shouted at, he got cheated. Once, a man drove off without paying, but he kept going because every evening, Mama Bose was waiting. By 16, he had grown taller, harder, quieter. He moved to pushing a wheelbarrow in the market, carrying goods for traders, loading and unloading in the early mornings before school. The work left his shoulders stiff and his hands rough, but it also left him with something money cannot buy, the knowledge that no condition was permanent and no weight was too heavy if you chose to carry it. Then the thing he feared most happened. Mama Bose fell sick. It started as something she dismissed, fatigue, a cough that wouldn't leave, weight that kept dropping. By the time the hospital gave it a name, it had already gone too far. Sadik did everything. He worked double hours, he borrowed, he prayed in ways he never had before. He sat beside her hospital bed and held her hand and talked to her about the future, about his workshop, about the big house he would build for her one day. She smiled when he talked like that. She believed him. But the body has its own timeline. One cold night, while rain knocked against the hospital window, Mama Bose let go. Sadik buried her with borrowed money. He stood at her graveside in the only good shirt he owned, dry-eyed, in the way that people are when the grief is too large for tears. And standing there in the wet grass, with nothing but her memory and an orphan's stubborn pride, he made a promise to himself, spoken quietly, heard no one. I will not be defeated, not by this life, not by anyone. Lagos swallowed him at first. The city has no patience for grief. It moves, and if you stand still, it moves through you. Sadik arrived with almost nothing, a small bag, the kind of mental toughness only suffering can build, and a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Some nights he slept under bridges, using his bag as a pillow. Some mornings he was robbed before he could earn. The city tested him in every way a city knows how to test a young man with no connections and no family name to lean on. But Sadik had something that couldn't be stolen. He had learned in the deepest possible way that comfort was temporary and character was permanent. Mama Bose had taught him that. The streets had reinforced it. One afternoon, following the sound of metal and the smell of engine oil, he wandered into a mechanic workshop behind a busy junction in Mushi. The sign above the gate read, "Baba Finish Work Auto Repairs. We fix what others fear." The man himself was in his late 60s, broad-shouldered, with grease permanently embedded in the lines of his hands. His real name was Babatunde, but in the mechanic world of Lagos, he was simply Baba Finish Work, because he had never in 40 years returned a car to its owner without completely finishing what he started. If your engine was crying, Baba Finish Work diagnosed it like a doctor. If your transmission had given up, he resurrected it. The wealthy men of Lagos, the men with German cars and imported parts, trusted him completely. When Sadik walked in and asked for work, Baba Finish Work looked at him for a long time. "What do you know about cars?" he asked. "Nothing," Sadik said honestly, "but I know how to learn and I know how to work." The old man studied him further. "You look like someone life has beaten." "Yes, sir," Sadik said without flinching, "but I am still standing." That answer earned him a sleeping mat in the corner of the workshop and his first real break. He started at the bottom, fetching tools, cleaning parts, running errands, watching everything. He asked questions that annoyed the senior mechanics and kept asking them anyway. He stayed after closing time, reading whatever manuals and pamphlets he could find, tracing diagrams with his finger in the dark. Within 2 years, he was doing home service repairs alone. Within 4, rich clients were requesting him by name. He had a gift for it, a mechanical intuition that went beyond training. He could listen to an engine and hear what was wrong, the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. He had the patience to do things properly when others cut corners. He became, in the quiet way that real competence always does, indispensable. He never missed a day, never left a job unfinished, never charged more than he quoted. And the name he was building, slowly, quietly, day by day, was beginning to carry weight. Among Baba Finish Work's most high-profile clients was a man whose cars were always expensive and always needed impeccable service, Chief Tunde Balogun. Sadik had heard the name mentioned in passing, just another wealthy client in a city full of wealthy clients. He knew nothing else. He did not yet know that this man was the reason his mother packed him into a motor park and walked away. Fate, it seems, keeps its own appointments. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon. Chief Tunde's wife's Mercedes AMG had stalled at the gate of their Lekki estate. The driver had tried everything. Nothing worked. Baba Finish Work was on another job and sent Sadik. The address was in the kind of Lekki that has its own grammar. Wide roads, manicured hedges, security posts with polite guards who ask for your name in a way that reminds you they could also ask you to leave. The mansion sat behind a tall, grey fence. 4 luxury cars in the driveway. A fountain that served no purpose except to announce that money lived here. Sadik walked quickly and without ceremony. He was like that, efficient, focused, unbothered by opulence. He'd long since stopped being impressed by other people's wealth. He had his own quiet ambition, and it didn't require comparing. He finished the job in under an hour. He stood outside the car, wiping his hands on a cloth, waiting for someone to process payment. The front door opened. A woman walked out, and for one suspended, breathless moment, the world stopped. She had aged, not badly, but noticeably. The years had added something to her face that wasn't there before, a tightness around the mouth, a guardedness in the eyes. But he would have known her anywhere, in any crowd, in any lifetime. It was Halima, his mother. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. Something moved across her face, shock, then recognition, then fear, all of it in under 2 seconds. Then she made her choice, as she always had. Her expression hardened. "What is this?" she called out loudly, walking toward the car with exaggerated displeasure. "This car is not fixed well. What kind of shoddy work is this?" Sadik said nothing. Her husband emerged from the doorway, curious. Halima pressed on, her voice rising, performing indignation for an audience of one. She pointed at the car, at Sadik, at the sky, as though the universe itself had wronged her. "Never call this mechanic again. These people don't know what they are doing." Chief Tunde looked briefly confused, but said nothing. He trusted his wife. The money was transferred from the household account. The gate opened. Sadik picked up his tools. He walked out without a word. Not because he was afraid, not because he was ashamed, but because he understood, in a way that had taken him years to reach, that some people never change, and some confrontations have no winners. And the most devastating thing you can do to someone who abandoned you is to simply show them, without saying a word, exactly who you became without them. 3 years later, Sadik opened his own workshop. He named it after Mama Bose. It was small at first, but it grew the way honest things grow, steadily, without drama. He hired 3 mechanics who shared his standards. His reputation expanded into Ikoyi, Victoria Island, Banana Island. The kind of clients who didn't look at prices. He was 29 years old, with property in his name and a life built entirely from his own hands. Meanwhile, across the city, Halima's world was coming apart in ways she hadn't foreseen. Chief Tunde wanted a son. He had always been clear about this, which was the cruelest irony, given everything she had sacrificed. But her body did not cooperate. Months became years. Doctors gave careful explanations. And Chief Tunde's patience wore thin in ways that money can maintain, but cannot ultimately disguise. Then, an old mutual acquaintance, someone from Halima's past who knew the full story, let it slip at a gathering that Halima had once abandoned a child, a son, a 10-year-old boy left at a motor park. Chief Tunde heard the rumor. He was a man who verified things. He investigated quietly, the way powerful men do when they believe they have been deceived. What he found destroyed 15 years of carefully constructed lies in a matter of days. He filed for divorce. He was methodical about it, legal, thorough, devastating. The businesses she co-owned were disentangled. The properties she'd assumed were joint were not. The daughters from his previous relationship who had tolerated her at best departed without looking back. Halima found herself alone in the echoing silence of a life that had been entirely built on other people's foundations. She reached out to old friends. Most were too busy or too cautious. Some were quietly satisfied. She tried to revive old business contacts. Too many bridges had been burned in the years of her comfort. And in the dark quiet of her nights, she began to think about Sadik. At first, she told herself it was just curiosity. Then she told herself she wanted to explain. Then, with the particular honesty that only devastation produces, she admitted to herself the truth. She wanted someone who was obligated to her. Someone who shared her blood. Someone who might, against all reason, still have space for her. She hired someone to find him. It didn't take long. His workshop was known. His name was respected. She stood outside his gate on a Wednesday morning, wearing clothes that were still nice but no longer had the certainty of wealth behind them. She looked older than her years. The beauty was still there, underneath, but buried now under something that had no name. Not quite regret, not quite grief. Something heavier than both. He came out when he was told someone was asking for him. He looked at her for a long moment. She opened her mouth. Something about circumstances, about youth, about not knowing, about the mistakes that life leads us into, about how she had never stopped thinking about him. He listened. He let her finish. And then he said, quietly, without anger, without tears, with the absolute stillness of a man who had already done his mourning years ago at a graveside in the rain. I know who you are. I have always known. And I want you to know that I am fine. I built something. I survived. And the woman who made that possible is already gone. She was my mother. He paused. I don't hate you. I stopped a long time ago. But you should know that what you came looking for, I can't give it to you. Not because I'm cruel, but because you already made your choice. And some choices are permanent. He turned and walked back into his workshop. The gate closed. Halima stood on the pavement for a long time. Then she walked away. There is a particular kind of loneliness that visits people who have traded love for comfort and eventually lost both. Halima learned its name in the years that followed. And Sadik, the boy she erased from her story, had quietly written his own. This story is dedicated to every child who survived abandonment and built something extraordinary from the rubble. And to every Mama Bose, the ones who showed up when they had no obligation to.